Thank you, and welcome to another edition of the Windy City Nitty Gritty Podcast. I'm your host, Walter Hefner, and on this episode, talking about one of my favorite video games, which is WWF No Mercy, which came out on the Nintendo 64. Now, I'm a big wrestling fan, and, when you're a wrestling fan, you get into any and everything that's wrestling, I remember some of the other wrestling video games that I played growing up, on Nintendo. They had a pro wrestling game they came out with, as well as they also had a WrestleMania on Nintendo. I can remember playing Sega Genesis, and, they had the Royal Rumble game, and then they had a WWF Raw game that came out on the Sega Genesis. And as time went on, just playing various other wrestling games, but something about WWF No Mercy that just made it stand out, and it still stands out today. You still have wrestling fans as well as video gamers that still talk about how it's one of the greatest wrestling games ever made. So just to give you a little information about the game, WWF No Mercy was released on the Nintendo 64 game system. This came out back in November 17th of 2000. Now, the game was published by a group called THQ. Now, THQ was very popular, and you're probably familiar with some of their other wrestling game titles, such as WCW NWO World Tour, WCW NWO Revenge, as well as WWF WrestleMania 2000. But when they came out with WWF No Mercy, that was really the one that put their name on the map. That was really the game that put them on the map overall. Again, I can't say it enough. And even the game ratings from the various game magazines back in the day say it all as well. You may remember GamePro magazine, they gave it 5 stars. Game Informer magazine gave it a 9.5 out of 10. As well as IGN Gaming Magazine gave it a 9 out of 10. Now, this was a great WWE wrestling game at the time on the Nintendo 64. It consisted of a lot of the men and women WWE superstars from the Attitude Era. You had wrestlers like The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Triple H, The Undertaker, Kane, Edge, The Hardys, the Dudley Boys, Chris Jericho, Chris Benoit, just to name some of the wrestlers on there. And then you had some other wrestlers that you can unlock through the storyline mode, as well as when you played the Royal Rumble. Now, the great thing about the game were the various type of matches you could have besides, singles matches, tag team, triple threat matches. You could have a hardcore match. You could have a steel cage match, ladder match. You can even set the time limit on a match or no time limit. For a tag match, you can have it where you can have them where it's no tag at all, and you can have both all 4 opponents in the ring at one time. You can even make a submission match on the game. So it was a lot of options. You can even a first blood match. So, that was one of the cool things about that game. It was a game that, just set the tone for some of the other wrestling games that came after that. So it had a lot of different features, had a lot of different options to it. And, it also had a create a wrestler feature on there where you could create other wrestlers, whether male or female. Even the movesets, you had different moves beside what the main wrestlers had. There were other moves that you can make when creating a wrestler, and, I got so into the game. Now, you may remember the Nintendo 64 controller had a little slot underneath it for a memory pack. And at the rate I was creating wrestlers, I had about 4 or 5 memory packs. I was creating wrestlers from back in the day, such as Hulk Hogan or Ultimate Warrior. I was creating wrestlers from WCW, such as Sting, Ric Flair, or DDP for that matter. And then, I'm creating some various wrestlers from New Japan, such as, Jushin Liger, Kensuke Sasaki, or Power Warrior, as some folks may remember him from when he used to team with the late Road Warrior Hawk in New Japan. And even making some of the indie wrestlers from the Chicago scene. Those wrestlers consist of guys like, Fallen Angel, Christopher Daniels, Steve Boz, just name some of the Chicago wrestlers that I watched on TV while watching, WCW and WWE during the Monday Night Wars. But the thing about No Mercy, it was one of the best wrestling games ever made. People still, again, talk about how it's the cream of the crop of all wrestling games. Nothing against the WWE 2K games that come out now, still play those. But, at the same time, nothing still would top No Mercy. No Mercy was that, predecessor as to how a wrestling game should be. And, with No Mercy, again, I'll admit there were a couple of times where, just when I thought I was through it in playing the Nintendo 64, I would go right back to the store, get a Nintendo 64, get a copy of No Mercy, just to, for the nostalgia, just for that, retro feel, just for, for the love of, the game itself, And, the game did so well, it sold over 1 million copies. And it's even had a cult following to this day. You even have fans wishing that it would be brought back on today's systems, such as PS4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch. Now, the only thing with a Nintendo Switch, they don't do WWE games. So, if they were to bring it back, it'd probably be on PS4 or Xbox One. Now, some of the cool things about that game were the fact that you can create wrestlers, create different type of moves with them. And they even had a feature on there where you could steal an opponent's finisher. When you powered up your attitude meter, you can, instead of doing the finisher for that certain wrestler that you chose, you can, steal that opponent's finisher and use that opponent's finisher on them. So a couple cool things. The creative wrestler feature, the fact that you can steal an opponent's finisher, and then, playing throughout the story mode or even the Royal Rumble mode where you can unlock other characters that are in the game, unlocking guys like Ken Shamrock, Shawn Michaels, Jared King Lawler, Jim Ross, Pat Patterson, and even Andre the Giant was on this game. So, a lot of different wrestlers you can unlock. They also had another feature called the SmackDown Mall. So as you played through the story mode for the belts or even did the Royal Rumble, you would accumulate money, and you could take that money and, purchase other wrestling moves, wrestling gear, even purchase, wrestling rings, weapons, or even purchase wrestlers that you weren't able to unlock either through the story mode or with the Royal Rumble. Now, that was one of the great things, and now there were a couple of negatives to this game. Now, early on when the first release of the copies of No Mercy, there was this little game glitch. Now, you may remember with that game glitch that you could be playing the game, accumulating money, have created some wrestlers, or you may have changed your wrestler's gear to try and keep up with the times as to, that design or different type of gear they're wearing. And then all of a sudden, everything just resets back to its original mode. So for some reason, that glitch came along, but THQ, they were, I gotta say, they were a great company for doing this, but they were able to allow you to, if you had a copy of the No Mercy game that had the glitch to it, you're able to send it back to THQ, and then they would send you a new copy of the No Mercy game that was glitch-free. So I had to do that myself, so have one of those copies with the glitch in it, call THQ, mailed the glitch copy to them, they sent me back a new copy, and I was good to go from there. Didn't have to worry about, losing money or any of the creative wrestlers I created. Was able to play and just create and go from there with no problems. And another thing, negative that I would have to say would be with the creative wrestler, masks. Now, with some of the different moves, you were able to make little lightweight wrestlers, and even if you were attempting to make a luchador like, say, Rey Mysterio, unfortunately there was no mask to, hide the face with to make a masked wrestler like a Rey Mysterio or Juventud Guerrero or Jushin Thunder Liger, so that was the only knock I got against the creator wrestler. But the biggest knock I would say I had against that game would be the fact that you couldn't edit or change the main wrestler's moves. I mean, you could change their gear, but you couldn't change your moves. Even when you go into the moveset, you'll see it says unable to edit. And at the time, there were various wrestlers that added different moves to their arsenals, because you had Kurt Angle doing the ankle lock like Ken Shamrock. Unfortunately, you couldn't change that over to that type of ankle lock how Ken Shamrock would do, And even with The Undertaker now, at the time, when Undertaker was on that game, he was doing his American Badass gimmick. Now, with that character, his finisher was the Last Ride. However, there's those of us that, love to see Undertaker do the Tombstone. Unfortunately, we couldn't do any editing to, add the Tombstone to his arsenal as well. So the only time you got to get Undertaker to do the Tombstone is if you played a one-on-one match with Kane and you stole Kane's finisher, because Kane's finisher was the Tombstone on the game. So the only time you could see Undertaker do the Tombstone on that game is if, one-on-one with Kane and you stole Kane's finisher and hit the Tombstone. So that was the only thing I really didn't like, the fact that you can edit or change the moves as time went on with these wrestlers, as they added different moves to their arsenal. That would have been a cool feature where you could not only update their wrestling gear, but update the moves as well. That would have been a great feature to have. But overall, it was a great wrestling game and still is to this day. Like I said, there were a couple of times where I just went back to the store, maybe about 2 or 3 times in my lifetime, and got a Nintendo 64 and a copy of No Mercy just, for the love of it, just for the fun of the game, And again, a great game for its time and a great game still to this day. Those of you that still have your Nintendo 64 or know somebody that has a Nintendo 64 in that game, enjoy that game and play it as much as you like, even for the nostalgia purposes. Another cool feature is how the game tried to, keep up with anything related to the character. For example, Chris Jericho's entrance with the countdown clock, or after Kane would win a match, how Kane would, do his little thing in the ring where he would raise his hands up and bring them back down for the fire to go off along the ring post, or even the dance with Too Cool and Rikishi. So, that was a cool feature to see on that as well. And, that's all I have to say about the game on today. So, hope you enjoyed listening to this as much as I did enjoy talking to you about this game. So, if you ever get there to get a Nintendo 64 and looking for a good wrestling game to play, I highly recommend WWF No Mercy. And this is all I have to say on today. So, thank you for listening. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Windy City Nitty Gritty, as well as don't forget to subscribe and like on our YouTube channel. And God bless you guys, and take care.